The world teetered on the precipice of an abyss in the late 1930s. The shadow of global conflict lengthened. It began to fracture rigid societal structures. These structures had long confined women to specific, often passive, roles. The sheer scale of the looming war would necessitate an urgent, unprecedented call for contributions. This call would come from every quarter. It revealed that courage, intellect, and an unwavering moral compass knew no gender. Women, driven by conscience and a profound desire to serve, would step forward. They often entered the perilous realms of espionage, resistance, and humanitarian aid. They dismantled barriers one act of defiance at a time. This was not, however, a sudden awakening. The seeds of female involvement in national defense had been sown decades earlier. As far back as the Revolutionary and Civil Wars, women had served. Their stories were often relegated to footnotes or forgotten entirely. A more tangible precursor arrived in 1917. The US ended 1917. Armed services began recruiting women for World War I. Among them were the Hello Girls, telephone operators who served with distinction on the front lines in France. Their vital communications work was a harbinger of the larger, more diverse roles women would soon embrace. Yet, their recognition as veterans would be a battle fought for 60 long years. It was a testament to the systemic indifference they faced. For some, the awareness of impending catastrophe was deeply personal. It predated the war itself. Ruth Gruber, a brilliant young mind, witnessed the chilling rise of Hitler in 1930s Germany firsthand. She was earning her doctorate in Cologne at just 20 years old. This early exposure to political injustice instilled in her a profound sense of urgency. It gave her a desire to document the unfolding horrors. Her journalistic work, which included an assessment of the Soviet Arctic, sharpened her observational skills. It prepared her for a future role she could scarcely imagine. The path to purpose was often paved with rejection. Virginia Hall, with a fierce, independent spirit, harbored dreams of a diplomatic career, but she found herself repeatedly stonewalled by the State Department. Her gender and a life-altering disability, which had left her with a prosthetic leg she nicknamed Cuthbert, were cited as insurmountable obstacles, yet each rejection only hardened her resolve. It fueled an unyielding determination to find an alternative avenue for service. This path would ultimately lead her to the clandestine world of espionage. Even the glittering world of professional sports found its purpose disrupted. Alice Marble, a celebrated international tennis star, felt a growing frustration. Her athletic triumphs, though remarkable, lacked meaning in the face of escalating global tensions. The attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 intensified this feeling. It shifted her focus from the courts to war-related activities. It was during this period that she met publisher Max Gaines. He was planning the first issue of Wonder Woman. Alice, a natural athlete with a heart for the greater good, immediately recognized the comic's potential. It could promote female heroes. She became an associate editor and contributed real women heroes from history, stories. She laid the groundwork for a different kind of heroism. Across Europe, the moral imperative to resist and rescue grew with terrifying speed. In Poland, Hilda Gimpel Eisen's vibrant hometown of Izbica, a place where the smell of baking bread once signified home and safety, was shattered. The German and Russian invasion of 1939 destroyed it. The subsequent German occupation brought systematic persecution. Jews were forced to wear the yellow star. Their sacred Torah was desecrated. Their cemetery was destroyed. As a ghetto was established, slowly squeezing the life from its inhabitants, Hilda and her husband David were forced to flee. They joined the desperate exodus from their homes. In the Netherlands, the personal threat of Nazi occupation propelled Diet Iman and her fiancé Heinz Sietzma from simple acts of defiance to perilous resistance work. A chilling turning point arrived in September 1942. Their Jewish friend Hermann received a summons. Its telltale J marked him for death. This stark realization ignited their resolve. It propelled Diet from simple acts of solidarity to coordinating shelter for scores of Jewish people. It transformed their lives into a dangerous, high-stakes fight for survival. In Belgium, Mary Sigillo's family felt the premonition of war. Her grandfather, sensing the coming darkness, solemnly entrusted her with the responsibility to protect their family. It was a plea that profoundly shaped her understanding of duty. When the German invasion swiftly curtailed freedoms in 1940, Mary was living under the omnipresent swastika. She was forced to report to Gestapo headquarters. 3 times a day, she made a conscious choice to resist. This set her on a path of immense danger and sacrifice. Perhaps no single moment crystallized the moral awakening more vividly than the Cook sisters' encounter with Bittier Mayer Lisman. Ida and Louise, 2 unassuming British civil service typists with a passion for opera, met Mitya in a tea shop. Her quiet revelation, "I'm Jewish. Didn't you know?" ripped away their comfortable ignorance. It exposed the appalling situation Jewish people in Germany found themselves in, stripped, without any rights as human beings at all. This encounter ignited their determination to act. It transformed their opera trips into a cover for a dangerous rescue operation. The horrific events of Kristallnacht in November 1938, which saw synagogues burned and Jewish businesses destroyed, further fueled their resolve. It created a crucial, albeit desperate, opportunity for private citizens to sponsor refugees. The sisters, like many others, found their moral compass tilting irrevocably as they smelled the scent of pure evil. This initial phase of the war profoundly challenged the prevailing notion that women's wartime roles were limited to passive support. It revised the perception that women's contributions to military history were a recent phenomenon. It highlighted their service dating back centuries. Even before the full fury of the conflict erupted, women were already deeply embedded in critical, often dangerous roles. They laid the groundwork for a broader, though still largely unacknowledged, impact that would forever alter the course of history. As the global conflict escalated, casting its long, dark shadow across continents, the war intensified. It intensified not just on battlefields, but in the clandestine alleys of espionage, the silent hum of code-breaking rooms, and the insidious whispers of psychological warfare. The rigid societal barriers that had long confined women began to crack under the immense pressure of necessity. It revealed an urgent, desperate need for specialized skills. These skills included language proficiency, keen intellect, and an unwavering nerve. These qualities knew no gender. Women, driven by a profound sense of purpose, moved into these shadows. They undertook high-stakes intelligence, counterintelligence, and disinformation operations. These operations would prove critical to Allied strategy, yet remain shrouded in extreme secrecy for decades. President Roosevelt's establishment of the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, under the formidable Major General William Wild Bill Donovan, created an entirely new avenue for individuals with these specialized skills. Donovan, a man who saw talent where others saw convention, sought out Donovan's dreamers. These were people who could think outside the box, operate in the grey, and wield words and ideas as weapons. When he lost control of the War Information Office, he simply created the Morale Operations, or MO, division within the OSS. This division focused on black information. This included disinformation, rumors, and psychological intimidation. It was here that women, with their often underestimated intellectual and linguistic prowess, found their true calling. They transformed from women's page assignments to the front lines of a hidden war. Among these shadow warriors was Virginia Hall, an American spy. Her fierce, independent spirit and unyielding resolve had already been forged in the fires of personal adversity and institutional rejection. Despite the State Department repeatedly denying her diplomatic dreams due to her gender and a life-altering disability that left her with a prosthetic leg she nicknamed Cuthbert, Virginia found her path to service. She found it through the British Special Operations Executive, or SSF. Arriving in Vichy, France in the summer of 1941, she plunged headfirst into the perilous world of clandestine operations. Her days were a tightrope walk over an abyss. She established safe houses. She embedded coded messages within seemingly innocuous conversations. She meticulously built resistance networks from the ground up. The constant whisper of danger was her closest companion. Lyon Gestapo Chief Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, obsessively hunted the woman who limps. He called her La Dame Kai Boit. Virginia, ever defiant, evaded capture through elaborate disguises and a dizzying array of aliases. It was a constant reminder of her own declaration, I must have liberty with as large a charter as I please. Her operations were a testament to sheer willpower. She transformed her physical identifier into a symbol of the Gestapo's frustration. Joining the ranks of the elite was Captain Stephanie Czech, a first-generation Polish-American. Her journey from a conventional women's Army Corps commission to the covert world of counterintelligence in the OSS's X2 branch marked a significant shift. She was one of only 650 operatives in this highly selective division. This was out of approximately 4,500 OSS personnel. Stephanie, fluent in Polish and possessing a rapid ability to acquire languages for survival, was uniquely suited for the nuanced, high-stakes game of counter-espionage. Yet her approach to covert work was refreshingly unconventional. Issued a standard-issue firearm, she famously quipped, "What the heck was I gonna do with a dumb gun?" Her true weapons were her intellect, her languages, and her unshakable calm under pressure. She proved that courage, in the shadows, often relied more on wit than weaponry. Across the English Channel, the demands of the war necessitated an unprecedented expansion of code-breaking efforts. The sheer volume of enemy communications, encrypted by increasingly complex machines, required a massive secret recruitment drive. Thousands of women, including waves like Betty Bemis Robarts, were brought into this highly specialized field. Their operational work, often on sophisticated electromechanical bombing machines designed to decipher Nazi Enigma codes, was conducted under immense pressure. It was done in an atmosphere of absolute secrecy. The young women, many barely out of their teens, toiled away. Their delicate touch proved superior for intricate tasks. Their minds raced to untangle the enemy's secrets. The gnawing uncertainty was a constant companion. Bound by strict oaths of silence, they had no idea of the true significance of their contributions. The weight of responsibility was palpable, but the full impact of their critical life-saving work would remain hidden, even from themselves, until decades after the war had ended. In the realm of psychological warfare, Betty McIntosh, a journalist with a knack for languages and a sharp writing ability, found her. Recruited personally by Donovan, she joined the MO group. She focused on black information propaganda designed to sow discord and demoralize the enemy. Her first major blackmail project was sparked by the discovery of moldy Japanese soldiers' postcards. She and her colleagues crafted new, demoralizing messages. These included, "Where are the supplies from home? We are starving in the jungle." They sent 475 doctored cards to undermine morale. This contributed to Prime Minister Tojo's resignation. She further exploited the Japanese military's policy against surrender by forging a surrender order. This bold move significantly increased Japanese soldiers' willingness to lay down their arms. Betty's Operation Hermit, a propaganda campaign relying on astrology and conjured sources, took an uncanny turn in early August 1945. Her vague pronouncements about impending destruction were followed, with shocking coincidence, by the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. Her supervisor, Colonel Richard Hetner, could only marvel, half-joking, "So that's why my dog Sammy defected." MO strikes again. The unpredictable nature of psychological warfare, capable of both subtle influence and chilling prescience, was never more apparent. Betty herself, ever modest, reflected on the chaotic nature of her tools. "It didn't work well, but I had it under control." This phase of the war profoundly challenged the prevailing notion that intelligence and covert operations were solely the domain of men. It debunked the myth that women's wartime roles were limited to traditional support. Instead, it showcased their vital technical, intellectual, and strategic contributions, from Virginia Hall's daring escapes and network building in occupied France to Stephanie Czech's elite counterintelligence work. Women were instrumental. From the thousands of women codebreakers silently unraveling enemy secrets to Betty McIntosh's ingenious psychological warfare campaigns, women were instrumental. They gathered vital intelligence, disrupted enemy operations, and influenced the psychological landscape of the war. Yet for all their ingenuity and immense personal risk, these extraordinary efforts remained largely unknown. Their heroes remained hidden in the shadows of secrecy. The global conflict, now a raging inferno, demanded an unprecedented mobilization of human will and skill. As millions of men marched to the front, the very fabric of society shifted. It compelled women to step into roles once deemed unthinkable for their gender. from the roar of aircraft engines to the quiet intensity of map rooms, from the blood-soaked earth of field hospitals to the harrowing journeys of refugees, women's contributions were not merely supportive. They were direct, indispensable, and often undertaken with extraordinary courage under the most brutal conditions. This era shattered antiquated notions of female capability. It proved that resilience, intellect, and sheer bravery knew no gender. It fundamentally altered the course of the war and the trajectory of women's place within it. While American WASP performed critical ferrying and towing duties, the risks faced by women pilots were universal and often deadly. Across the Atlantic, British women had already been flying military aircraft since 1941 as part of the Air Transport Auxiliary, or ATA. Among them was Mary Ellis, a young woman whose passion for flight propelled her into the heart of the war. Her daily routine involved piloting some of the most iconic and powerful warbirds of the era. These included Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Wellington bombers. She flew them from factories to frontline airfields, often through treacherous weather and under the constant threat of enemy attack. Each flight was a gamble. Mary recalled one harrowing experience flying a Spitfire across the Irish Sea when the engine suddenly cut out. The silence was deafening. The reality of her predicament was stark. Alone, high above the churning waves, she wrestled with the controls. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. Miraculously, the engine sputtered back to life just as she began to contemplate ditching. Such moments, repeated countless times by women pilots like her, were not just acts of skill, they were profound demonstrations of nerves of steel. They faced mechanical failures, navigational challenges, and the psychological toll of knowing their lives hung by a thread. They proved unequivocally that women were not only capable of high-risk aviation but excelled in it. They directly bolstered the Allied air war. The sheer, unyielding demand of the battlefield often pushed frontline personnel past the brink of exhaustion, none more so than the army nurses. For Kate Flynn and her unit, the 53rd Field Hospital, Christmas Eve of 1944, offered a brief, precious reprieve amidst the brutal Battle of the Bulge. They had found temporary shelter in an empty school near a convent. Nuns had offered them real beds, a luxury after months of pup tents. For a few hours, fine linen china and crystal adorned their makeshift dining area. It was a fleeting echo of normalcy and peace. But the war, relentless and unfeeling, quickly intruded. Abruptly, orders came down. Evacuate all patients. Prepare to move. The chief nurse, Marie, pleaded for a few more minutes. It was a whisper of defiance against the inevitable. But the military machine waited for no one. A colonel's voice, sharp and impatient, cut through the cold night. Those damn women are holding up the war. Kate and her weary colleagues scrambled. They ran out into the biting cold to join the legendary Red Bull Express convoy. Headlights stretched into the distance. It was an endless river of trucks loaded with vital supplies, all moving towards the front. Christmas Day itself found them shivering, exposed. They shared cardboard K rations in lieu of a festive meal. This forced departure, a stark symbol of duty over comfort, underscored the relentless demands on these women. Their resilience in such moments, returning immediately to the grim task of saving lives despite personal sacrifice, was instrumental. It helped maintain the remarkably low death rate in field hospitals. It challenged any lingering doubts about women's fortitude in combat zones. In the hushed, heavily guarded rooms of the Office of Strategic Services, a revolution in military intelligence was quietly unfolding. It was driven by the meticulous hands and minds of women like Marion Armstrong. As the war intensified, the need for precise, actionable intelligence intensified with it. It required cartographers to move beyond traditional flat maps. Marion and her colleagues pioneered new techniques. They developed 3D topographic maps, hand-drawn on acetate paper at an exacting 4:1 scale. These weren't just drawings, they were critical. They transformed complex terrain into tangible, understandable models for invasion planning. The map division rapidly standardized map products. It ensured that commanders across Allied forces received consistent, highly detailed intelligence. This rigorous approach, from the initial drafting to the final, standardized output, significantly enhanced planning capabilities. It allowed for unprecedented tactical and strategic foresight. The scale of their output was staggering. 8,200 new maps and two massive 50-inch globes were produced. They directly supported major Allied conferences and answered 50,000 requests. This wasn't just map-making. It was the birth of modern military intelligence cartography. It was a field revolutionized by the precision and dedication of women who turned lines and contours into pathways to victory. Ruth Gruber's singular mission aboard the Henry Gibbons was just one chapter in her lifelong commitment to bearing witness. It was, however, a defining chapter. As she moved among the 982 refugees, many still in their concentration camp pajamas, their feet bound with newspapers, she didn't just see a mass of humanity. She saw individuals, each carrying an unspeakable burden. She listened, truly listened. She urged them to share even the most obscene experiences. She reminded them that she was their first witness to America. Her camera became an extension of her empathy. It captured the haunted eyes, the tentative smiles, the quiet desperation, but her documentation extended far beyond the ship. After the war, she traveled through the bombed-out cities of Germany. She witnessed post-war devastation firsthand. Munich, she observed, was full of blasted buildings. The old landmarks were still there, but their backs were broken. The city was crippled, she said. She walked through huge makeshift cemeteries. She saw abandoned death camps. She met hundreds of thousands of displaced persons and death camp survivors. Their stories scarred her soul. She sat through testimony at the Nuremberg trials. She heard the raw, desperate pleas for a Jewish homeland. Her relentless work, using her words and images, implicitly served as a powerful counter-narrative. It challenged the pervasive, often convenient, idea that the US had done enough to save Jewish refugees. She understood that documenting these harrowing encounters was not just journalism. It was an act of profound moral advocacy. Thousands of miles away, in the grim reality of the Wasian Civilian Assembly Center in Japanese-occupied China, young Mary Taylor Previtt and her fellow missionary children faced a different kind of horror. Confined behind barbed wire, under the constant watch of armed guards, and the chilling spectacle of bayonet drills, their lives were a daily struggle. It was a struggle against hunger, illness, and the ever-present threat of random violence. Yet, amidst this chaos, a profound act of agency unfolded. It came not from military might, but from the quiet resolve of the camp's teachers. They understood that while they couldn't control the external brutality, they could create an internal sanctuary. They enforced strict routines and manners. They insisted on proper dining etiquette, even when the meager rations consisted of boiled animal grain and crushed shells. These beautiful triumphs of order and predictability transformed the dehumanizing environment into something resembling normalcy. Mary recalled how these rituals fostered a crucial sense of safety. It was a small but vital pocket of stability. Thanks to their dedication, despite living in a concentration camp, Mary emerged academically 2 years ahead of her peers. This quiet defiance by the educators, creating a haven of learning and decorum, against overwhelming despair, countered the myth that internment camps were solely places of broken spirits. It demonstrated the incredible power of human agency to cultivate hope and resilience even in the darkest of times, from the precarious cockpits of Spitfires flown by women like Mary Ellis, bravely navigating skies thick with danger, to the strategic planning rooms where Marion Armstrong's 3D maps revolutionized military intelligence, and the battlefront itself, where nurses like Kate Flynn faced down artillery fire to save lives. Women's direct contributions were not merely significant. They were indispensable. Ruth Gruber's compassionate documentation of refugee crises and Mary Previtt's childhood resilience in the face of internment underscored the profound human impact of their efforts. These women, in their diverse roles, saved lives, boosted morale, and provided critical intelligence. They fundamentally shaped the course of the war. They forever altered the landscape of what was deemed possible for women in uniform and beyond. Their stories, once hidden, now stand as undeniable proof of their courage, skill, and unwavering determination in the face of global conflict. The cannons fell silent. The bombs ceased to drop. The world began to breathe again. But for many women, the end of global conflict marked not a return to peace, but the beginning of a new, often solitary battle. It was a battle for recognition and a rightful place in a society eager to revert to old norms. The war had compelled them into roles of unprecedented responsibility and danger. Yet the prevailing sentiment in the aftermath was a quiet, insidious push for them to return to traditional domesticity. Their pivotal contributions were overlooked. Their sacrifices were minimized. Their official acknowledgement was delayed, sometimes for decades. The joy of liberation when it came was overwhelming, yet it was often intertwined with lingering trauma. For Mary Preverty and the other internees at Wavesien, August 17, 1945, was a day etched forever in memory. It was the moment 7 American OS paratroopers dropped from the sky like angels to shatter the barbed wire confines of their Japanese prison. The camp erupted in an emotional cacophony of screaming, laughter, and tears. It was a profound release from years of fear and deprivation. Yet, the emotional scars ran deep. For Hilda Gimpel-Eisen, liberation brought a different kind of devastation. Returning to her vibrant hometown of Izbica, Poland, after 5 harrowing years of war and resistance, she found only dark ashes falling like dead snowflakes onto still smoking rubble. Her family, her community, her home all were gone. The empty houses were mere shells. It was a stark, devastating realization that there was no life left to rebuild. The immediate post-war landscape remained treacherous for survivors, like Hilda. Her husband, David, a fellow partisan, was tragically murdered by vengeful Polish townspeople. It was a grim reminder that even with the war officially over, dangers for Jewish survivors persisted. Decades later, the psychological toll of wartime service would finally find a name for others. For Army nurse Kate Nolan, it wasn't until her return to Normandy in 2001 that the vivid sensory flashbacks of destruction and bodies brought on a diagnosis of PTSD. It marked a turning point in her personal, long-delayed processing of the war's indelible trauma. Amidst the chaos of war and the complex return to peace, an urgent, often unglamorous logistical challenge emerged. It was the monumental backlog of mail for millions of American troops, Red Cross workers, and civilians in Europe. No mail, no morale became the unofficial motto. It underscored the critical need for efficient postal services. Into this breach stepped the 6,898th Central Postal Battalion. It was an all-black Women's Army Corps, or WAC, unit, comprising 855 women. It was led by the formidable Major Charity Adams Early. Their mission was immense. They had to clear a 2-year accumulation of mail piled high in dark, unheated, rat-infested warehouses in Birmingham, England, and later Le Havre, France. The conditions were grim. The smell of mold, spoiling food, and torn packages leaking slimy contents filled the air. Yet, Charity Adams addressed her troops with unwavering resolve. "We have a job to do, and we're going to get it done. Now let's get organized." Working 3 shifts, 24/7, they processed approximately 65,000 letters per shift. They created 7 million index cards. They even established amenities like a beauty salon to boost spirits. Their efficiency was staggering. They cleared the 17 million pieces of mail in England and the 2-year backlog in France in a mere 3 months. Charity Adams' leadership was not just about logistics. It was a defiant stand against systemic racism. Early in her career, she had famously refused to command a segregated black training regiment. She declared, "I will not command such an outfit. I was raised in the southern United States, and I knew there was no such thing as separate but equal." Her resolve was tested again in England. Lieutenant General John C.H. Lee, the regional commander, questioned her troops' marching ability. He threatened to replace her with a white officer if she didn't command them in a segregated parade. Charity Adams stood firm. Her voice was resolute. "Over my dead body, sir." She threatened to file charges against him for using segregationist language. It was a pivotal act of defiance that earned her troops fierce loyalty and the sentiment, "Big Ma had their back." The 6,808's undeniable success challenged prevailing stereotypes about black women's capabilities. It demonstrated that their competence and efficiency exposed the inherent inequality and fallacy of separate but equal. However, for many women, the end of the war brought disillusionment and a protracted struggle for justice. The Women Air Force Service Pilots, or WASP program, for instance, had been terminated in June 1944. It was a casualty of a powerful propaganda campaign fueled by civilian male pilot instructors who feared losing their post-war jobs. False claims about WASPs being harder to train or causing more accidents, though none of it was true, led Congress to defeat the WASP bill. General Henry H. Hap Arnold, unwilling to fight Congress, chose to terminate the program. This effectively clipped their wings before they could officially serve as military pilots. Their records were sealed for 30 years. This systematically erased their wartime contributions. It denied them the recognition and benefits afforded to male veterans. It was a profound insult when in 1976, the Air Force announced it would begin to accept women for pilot training for the first time. This sparked outrage among WASP veterans. It reignited their decades-long campaign for acknowledgement. We were the first women pilots, and they weren't about to let the US's Air Force forget it, declared Millie Rexroth, a WASP veteran. For intelligence operatives like Stephanie Czech-Rader, the dissolution of the OSS in September 1945 left her in a precarious, dangerous limbo. Although the agency was formally dissolved, certain branches, including her X-2 counterintelligence unit, continued temporarily. This left agents with ambiguous mandates and limited support in a volatile post-war Europe. In January 1946, despite her reluctance, Stephanie was tasked with couriering a package of classified documents from Berlin to Warsaw. "I'm not a courier, don't give me that stuff." "I don't want it," she had protested. She was keenly aware of the extreme danger. During her return journey, at a German-Polish border checkpoint, her internal sensors were set on high. Employing quick thinking and a sixth sense, she intentionally bumped into another passenger. She surreptitiously passed off the documents moments before Polish security police arrested her. Though she was later released, the chilling realization that her cover was blown was undeniable. She continued her mission. She even enjoyed leading her Russian watchmen on circuitous routes. Before returning to the US in February 1946, she firmly declared, "Don't ask me to do this again." Her close call demonstrated exceptional operational skills and an unwavering nerve. It did so even after the formal end of the OSS. It highlighted the continued dangers for those in the shadows. This period profoundly challenges the notion that women's wartime contributions were minor or easily forgotten. Instead, it illuminates the complex and often difficult adjustments they faced. It reveals the deep-seated trauma they carried. It highlights the systematic gender bias that led to the denial of their recognition. As the world rebuilt, the women who had served so bravely found their contributions marginalized. Their battles for equal recognition were just beginning. This set the stage for decades of advocacy and a relentless fight to ensure their stories would finally be heard. The roar of victory celebrations that swept across the globe in 1945 often drowned out the quiet, insidious push for women to retreat from the roles they had so capably filled. Society, eager to re-establish traditional gender norms, inadvertently cast a long shadow over the extraordinary contributions of millions of women. Their stories of code-breaking, clandestine operations, piloting and frontline nursing were among the last to resurface. They were buried under layers of secrecy and systemic indifference. Yet, the seeds of change had been sown. The persistent efforts of these women and their allies would eventually crack open the historical record. They revealed a legacy of courage and defiance that continues to inspire. The road to recognition was long and arduous. For decades, the women who had toiled in silence, bound by oaths of secrecy, carried their untold stories alone. It wasn't until 1995, a full 50 years after the war's end, that the veil began to lift for the codebreakers. At the Sugar Camp reunion in Dayton, Ohio, hundreds of women finally learned the true significance of their wartime work. Betty Bemis Robarts, a wave who had meticulously soldered components for the bomber machines, exclaimed, "Oh my God, I didn't know." An earthquake rattled her heart, and old memories fell off the shelf and shattered. The room erupted in a cacophony of sound, exclamations of shock, surprise, questions, and bursting pride. It was a collective release of decades of unspoken service. It was the first significant public acknowledgement of their vital role in shortening the war and saving countless lives. For the women Air Force service pilots, or WASPs, the fight for acknowledgement was equally protracted. After their program was terminated in 1944, their records were sealed. Their service was effectively erased. It took until 1977 for President Jimmy Carter to sign a bill granting them military status and VA benefits. It was a hard-won victory after a relentless campaign. Even then, the battle for full respect continued. It was exemplified by the 17-month struggle led by Senator Martha McSally to ensure WASP Elaine Harmon could be buried at Arlington National Cemetery. In 2009, the WASPs received the Congressional Gold Medal. It was inscribed with the powerful declaration, "The first women in history to fly American military aircraft." This finally solidified their place in history. The struggle for recognition extended to the shadows of espionage. Stephanie Czech Rader, an OSS counterintelligence agent whose valor was denied proper commendation for decades due to pervasive gender discrimination, finally received her due. Thanks to the relentless advocacy of the OSS Society and Senator Mark Warner, the Legion of Merit was posthumously awarded to her in 2016. Senator Warner spoke of his pleasure at being able to right this historic wrong. He ensured Stephanie Rader would be buried with the honor and respect of a grateful nation. It was a powerful acknowledgement of her tough clandestine missions during the Cold War. For the all-black, all-female 6,888 Central Postal Battalion, recognition came even later. Despite their extraordinary efficiency in clearing a 2-year mail backlog in Europe, their wartime service went largely unacknowledged for nearly 3/4 of a century. In 2018, the Army dedicated a memorial to the battalion at Fort Leavenworth. It was a statement of responsibility, determination, and honor. The following year, the Secretary of the Army awarded the Meritorious Unit Citation to the 688. It was their only military award for wartime service. It solidified their rightful place in history. As their commanding officer, Charity Adams Early, had once humbly stated, "You don't know you're making history when it's happening." I just wanted to do my job. Beyond official commendations, many women found purpose in transforming their wartime trauma into a powerful force for good. Hilda Gimple Eisen, who endured the filth, hunger, and fear of the Lublin ghetto and the dark ashes of her destroyed hometown, arrived in the USAS in 1948 with nothing but her husband, Harry, and an unyielding will to survive. From cleaning meat barrels in a hot dog factory, they built a multi-million-dollar egg business, Norco Ranch Incorporated. Harry, with his characteristic humor, would joke, "I talked Jewish to my chickens and they laid eggs." They became significant philanthropists. They donated substantially to the Holocaust Museum and Magen David Adom. Their daughter noted that they felt fortunate to be on the giving end of charity, always saying, "Thank God we live in America." Hilda's life, spanning a century, became a testament to resilience. She created a family forged out of hardship, hope, and meaning. Mary Previte, a survivor of the Weijian Civilian Assembly Center in China, transformed her childhood suffering and the later amputation of her hand into a lifelong mission. As superintendent of the Camden County Youth Center, she connected deeply with at-risk youth. She used her own experiences to teach lessons about consequences. She told them, "I was so nice and I was only 14. Her pilgrimage of the heart to find her 7 OSS rescuers, crisscrossing America to thank them face-to-face, culminated in an emotional reunion in China. She reunited with her Chinese interpreter, Wang Chang'an, at age 83. She declared, "I went looking for the soul of America, and it is beautiful." She embodied her belief that war and hate and violence never open the way to peace, whose mission to rescue Jewish refugees on the Henry Gibbons defined her wartime experience, found her life's trajectory profoundly shaped by bearing witness. Her first-hand observations of the bombed-out cities of Germany, the makeshift cemeteries, and the Nuremberg trials solidified her commitment to Jewish justice and the establishment of a homeland. She became a lifelong advocate. She used her words and image, typewriter, and cameras as tools to fight injustice. She left a powerful call to keep working for peace, fighting injustice and raising our children and grandchildren to live with decency, dignity, and hope. Diet Iman, the Dutch resistance fighter who risked her life to shelter Jews, carried the trauma of her experiences, hiding in Dachau, in silence for over 30 years. But as Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism began to rise, she felt compelled to speak out. She believed, "If something happened in your life, and God is involved, you have to tell it." Her memoir, Things We Couldn't Say, and her tireless advocacy against historical revisionism earned her accolades, including the Righteous Among Nations Award. She became a symbol of resilience and faith for future generations. These women, once hidden figures, emerged as crucial role models. Their actions paved the way for advancements in women's rights and opportunities across society. The glass or even the brass ceiling began to crack. It allowed women to enter previously male-dominated fields. The gradual opening of military academies in the 1970s, the lifting of combat exclusion policies in the 1990s and 2000, and the increasing enrollment of women in medical schools and STEM fields are direct results of the groundwork laid by these pioneers. Women like Anne Dunwoody, the first four-star general, and Senator Martha McSally, a former Air Force pilot, stand on the shoulders of those who came before. As Alex Borstein powerfully urged in her Emmy Awards acceptance speech, recounting her grandmother's escape from execution, "Step out of line." Their stories provide a vital counter-narrative to historical accounts that have largely excluded or minimized women's contributions. They challenge the notion that women's historical roles were minor or confined to domestic spheres, yet the struggle for full equality is ongoing. It is a testament to the persistent nature of institutional discrimination. Milestones like the election of Kamala Harris as the first woman and first woman of color as vice president in 2020 represent monumental steps forward. Her declaration, "I will not be the last," echoes the enduring spirit of these trailblazing women. It echoes from Jacinda Ardern to Greta Thunberg, Malala Yousafzai, and Coco Gauff. Their combined legacy underscores that true equal opportunity means achievement becomes the norm, not the exception. The courage, resilience, and quiet strength of these women, once hidden, now stand revealed as foundational to modern progress. Their diverse forms of heroism, whether in the clandestine war of wits, the daring flight of aircraft, the compassionate care of the wounded, or the tireless fight for justice, have reshaped history. They continue to inspire. The fight for equality, they remind us, is a continuous, inspired journey. It is built on the unwavering belief that nobody ever gives away power. If you want to achieve that, you go for it. But when you get it, you must use it.